My practice basically focuses on the built environment, the way cities are built, and how we live in cities. So it kind of illuminates the way we live and reflects on the way we live.
Okay. Okay, so we have a small problem with the connection for this presentation. We will first see the presentation of Dimitris.
Okay.
Hello.
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 Thank you for inviting me and having me here. So I'm going to show just also some images from the two main activities that I have. One is as an architect and the work we do in our office, which is based here in Thessaloniki. And the second part is as a professor at the School of Architecture here at the Aristotle University, which are two different things, but at the same time they are connected in many ways. So one thing informs the other.
We are just waiting to see.
Okay. So, as I said, the first part is my work as an instructor at the School of Architecture here in Thessaloniki, where I teach architectural design and architectural theory, and with a special focus on digital media. So there are some images. Maybe you can just move through the images. Student work from the studios and that we are teaching, where digital tools and digital media are important part of what we do, both at an undergraduate level, which the images that we are looking at, where we try to see how the students can bring the new tools and new media into their design process, and how that process can change architecture and what they design. And we also do the same, but in a different level in the postgraduate program that I teach. It's the next slide, I guess. It's called Advanced Design, and it's a postgraduate program at the School of Architecture again, where we look into more depth at digital tools, digital media, how they alter the way we perceive space and how they alter the way we design space. So more or less that's okay. Maybe we can move through the rest of the images.
Maybe we can see more.
That's more or less about the part that has to do with teaching at the School of Architecture. The second part, which is our design practice, it's called Object-T, and it's based in Thessaloniki, as I said. And a large part of our work is competition entries. We try to work with competitions that take place in Greece and abroad. So we have several, again, some images that just illustrate what we do and how we work with those projects. This is, for example, our latest project is the entry for...
Congratulations for this project, for the second prize.
Thanks. It's for the redesign of the Aristotle Square, where we got the second prize. It's designed how we occupy it and how we can think maybe differently about public space. This, for example, is another project, again, Thessaloniki. It's a building for kindergarten and a shelter for the elderly. I guess we don't have to go through all the images in detail. This is a social housing project in Cyprus that was awarded last year with Best Project for 2021 in Greece. So there are different projects, different subjects, but they are in a way a line of thinking that explores similar ideas and it evolves over each project. So for us, each new project starts from where the previous stopped and continues that process. Other projects. This is for a public square in Pili, in Trikala. I think that in our practice we try to work with similar issues that we teach, that I teach at the school, but try to apply them in specific conditions. So it has to do with how we deal with new media and how we employ them in a creative way in our work. And a very important part of our work, both at the school and in our practice, has to do with how we form narratives, and we tell a story with what to do with our drawings and with what we design. I think that's more or less all about us. No, you can just go through.
Thank you very much, Dimitris.
Sure.
Thank you. We move on with Mariana. Okay.
Sorry. Stefanos is saying that he cannot hear us, but he can hear us from Tenia's mic. And he couldn't also see the presentation, so he had no visual.
Okay.
Let me try. Can I try this? Stefanos. 1, 2. Can you hear us? Στέφανε. Στέφανος ακούει. 1, 2. He's not responding.
Hello?
Okay, so can you
hear me?
you can hear us?
Yeah, and I can hear you.
Great.
Hello?
Cool.
Turn to go.
So is it here? So this is a 20-minute, two-channel film shot exclusively with a drone. It was shot in 2018 in Malaysia for the Kuala Lumpur Architecture Festival. We can go through the screens to get an impression of how the city has been captured. And a short trailer. No sound. Maybe pause it. So this is one of my latest works, and before that, I spent lots of time in Asia. This is a project I did on my way to Macau from Hong Kong. My visa had expired, so I had to leave Hong Kong for a few hours, and I visited Macau, which was, the day was awful, everything was brown, you could barely breathe, and this is me observing the city, a city that is probably made for casinos, and people who'd like to spend their time in casinos. They host 43 casinos, as far as I remember. Um, this is an attempt to deconstruct Athens. And this is the result of a 6-year observation of the changes that Athens underwent. The riots, the social degradation, and me walking around a city that was constantly being transformed and kind of becoming more and more dystopian. This is another project that was shaped during my 3 residencies in Asia. The term groundlessness is a term used by Heto Steyer, talking about the disembodied gauge that the drone provides, and the new visualities that you deal with when you change the perspective. And this is another project. I only have 2, 3 images. Breakground is the process where you prepare an empty lot for the foundations of new constructions. So this one has an environmental touch. So this is basically, it's part of my latest works, more mature works in a sense, and it's quite clear that I'm more and more interested in what surrounds us, and how we stand in places where development takes place and there's no room for sustainability, which is part of our today's conversation.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Now we are welcoming Stefanos digitally and happy to hear from him.
Thank you for having me.
Hello?
It's a bit strange not to be. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes?
Thank you for having me. It's a bit strange to not be there with all of you and see remotely. I'm Stefanos Levidis. I am a researcher at the agency Forensic Architecture, where I oversee our work on borders and migration. Today, by means of introduction, rather than introducing myself, I'll try to introduce the work of the agency a bit. I'm getting a bit of feedback. I can hear myself from the room. You can hear me okay though, right?
I can hear you pretty good, yes.
Okay. I'll get used to it. So I'll start by saying a couple of words about what forensic architecture is. I'll show snippets of our investigations to introduce you to, briefly introduce you to our methodologies, and hopefully offer some cues for the discussion later. Let me share screen 1 second. Okay, and you can see my screen okay, right?
Yes, we can see.
All right, thank you. So forensic architecture, we are an independent research agency based at Goldsmiths University in London. We're a multidisciplinary team made up of architects, but also investigative journalists, artists, activists, software developers, filmmakers, and we often collaborate with experts in other fields, such as acoustics or ballistics experts, oceanographers, thermodynamic scientists, etc. And we work in partnership with institutions across civil society, grassroots activists, legal teams, international NGOs, and media organizations to carry out investigations with and on behalf of communities and individuals affected by conflict, by police brutality, by environmental violence, which is what we will also be discussing today, I guess, and crucially, which is my domain, the violence enacted by border regimes. Perhaps I should say a few quick words about how we understand the term forensic in forensic architecture, because this is something that we get asked quite a lot. Now, forensics is a term and a practice that's typically associated with the state. It's the art of the police and of the official institutions who, taping off, sealing off a crime scene, and restricting access to evidence, always maintain an optical advantage towards a violent event, and therefore a monopoly over the production and dissemination of truth claims. And here we see what might be familiar to a few of you, the murder scene of Pavlos Fissas in Keratsini. And you see this characteristic tape and forensics, police forensics doing their work. Or the scene where Zach Kostopoulos was murdered in Athens 3 years ago. Zach's life was deemed ungrieved and worthy of due process. There is no tape at all. There's only one of the assailants mopping the evidence away. So our practice, in a way, attempts to undo this advantage the official institutions hold on access to evidence and to truth claims. We try to unsettle these asymmetries of power by contaminating and examining these official narratives. And we see this as a radical act of witnessing that's an important part of process of political resistance. So we return to the original Latin meaning of the term forensics, that which belongs to the forum or the agora, as is the case here in Greece, a space of public dialogue and political engagement. This is just a quick screen grab of our site to see the width of the different projects that we do. To do that, we often operate in different and sometimes conflictual forums beyond the legal sphere. So we work within cultural spaces, museums, but also through the media. In short, ours is the practice of making evidence public and of developing the tools to make this possible and to socialize this evidence. But how do we fit in today's discussion? Why architecture? This is also something we get asked quite a lot. Our investigative approach responds to an evolutionary warfare, in particular, is an increasingly urban phenomenon. Cities and buildings are no longer simply the site where conflict or violence plays out. On the contrary, buildings are often themselves a target, and weapons are designed accordingly. So the tissues of the urban fabric record the violence that unfolds around it. They become an index that allows us, architects, spatial practitioners, to examine the crimes that have been perpetrated in their vicinity. So forensic architecture in that sense operates as a certain type of building pathologist, like a coroner would do with a body, or an archaeologist with an excavation site. That's what we do with cities, with space, with the built environment. Here in this particular project, we're investigating the Israeli air raids in the town of Rafah, in the Gaza Strip in August 2014. And we navigate the city using bomb clouds, so the clouds of dust that a building becomes after being bombarded. And as these clouds rise above the buildings of Rafah, they become visible from various points of view, and no two clouds are identical. They serve as fingerprints for us in this case, that we use to geolocate different pieces of footage and to navigate the urban terrain in search of evidence and trying to reconstruct what happened that day. At the same time, the environments we inhabit are increasingly surveilled, they're increasingly technologicized, and acts of violence are often recorded and distributed in social and mainstream media more and more every day. So beyond reading traces of violence on space itself, we use space as a medium through which to archive, to navigate, and to understand images and the events they capture. And here we're back to Zach's case, again, in a Gladstone Street, navigating from cone view to cone view, different CCTV cameras to understand, try to piece together the minutes that led to Zach's murder. So we use 3D models, as you see here, as dynamic digital environments that help us locate cameras and other media artifacts. Modeling, therefore, here serves as an essential means to construct evidence and to assemble a forum around it. And to wrap up we understand state violence as a process that occurs across and is inscribed upon space, upon architecture itself. It's a process that always modifies the environment in which it takes place, both the built environment and the non-built environment. So we use architecture and filmmaking tools in reverse, in a way, to decode these modifications, to understand them, and to reconstruct violent events through the trace these leave on physical and on digital matter. And these are snippets from an investigation we carried out over the last 2 years that looks into cases of border violence, specifically pushbacks at the Evros border, a few hundred kilometers away from Thessaloniki. Here we use architectural software to work with witnesses in order to model certain border guard stations, certain holding sites, to identify the buildings they had been held in, and to narrate the conditions under which they were held. And with that, I will open it up for discussion.
Stefanos, thank you very, very much for your presentation also. Now, as we heard all of you, the three of you, we understand a little bit more why we are all sitting together today. It's like the three of you have common elements like architecture, but also using digital media to all of your projects, and also you always have a narrative, even though it seems like your final products, your projects are totally different one to the other, but maybe you all have a same starting point or different aspect of perspective, and we would like to hear some like a comment or how you stand carrying architecture and new media, but having a different narrative, how memory also being very present to your work, how this affects your starting point, how you start for a project, like if you have a specific process, or it's always something that the story brings together for you. I don't know who wants to start, or we only have one microphone now, or okay, so I don't know, but you can start. Okay, we start with Mariana.
Well, just a comment. I think that we all have architecture as a background, but we all work in different fields. So this is why our practice is so different. I no longer practice architecture. I'd say that I mean I work as an architectural photographer, which is it documents the result of architecture, but on the side I try to understand what's going on around me, and I do that with the use of the lens, through the lens. For sure, architecture has shaped myself and the way I look at things, and everything I include in a frame is architecturally represented in a sense. But I've chosen a different. I mean, I'm not an architect like Dimitris, and I'm not engaged socially engaged enough as Stefanos is through his work. I just observe and reflect on the way I understand reality.
Okay, so I guess we do have a process that we keep repeating in our projects when we start working. That there are some common elements in each time, but also it's unique when we repeat it. So I think for us the starting point is to try and establish a set of references that we can use. So in a way, we start by observing. It's important to understand, and those references they are those references they are on, let's say, two levels. There are, of course, architectural references. We have to look at what we have at hand, the problems that we have to face, the site, and other maybe the history of the site in terms of architecture, the memory in terms of architecture, and those are important. We start from that point too, but also we try to establish a set of references that are not architectural, and can be anything from movies or paintings or other cultural elements that for some reason for us makes sense to think of them in relation to each project that we have at hand. So then, having all those things, we try to create a story, a narrative that at the beginning is just for us. It helps us to start designing, start doing something. And then somehow the project takes a direction and we follow that direction. It's not that we want to achieve something specific each time. We just form this environment of all the references. We try to create links between them and then see where that takes us. And in most cases, it's something that you cannot really see exactly in the result where we started for. It's more of an internal thing for us to be able to work. But I like to believe that some things of this process, they pass in the final project and you can maybe trace them somehow.
Yeah, let me join the others in saying I also don't identify as an architect. Even though that's what I usually respond when people ask me, what do you do? Because it's too complicated to explain what we do in a nutshell. Like you said, Tenia, there's a very strong narrative element in the work that we do. Usually we begin from, an investigation for us is born on the day of the violent event in question. We're usually contacted by the people most affected, by the families of the people that were that underwent the violence that we're looking into, or by social movements that are resisting certain violent state practices. And we begin by unpacking the dominant narrative. So there's always we try to provide the counter narrative. So in the case of Zach, for instance, you have a narrative emerging that there was a drug user trying to rob a store in Omonia, or in the case of Pavlos, an altercation between football fans, hooligans, anarchists, and far right. So quite often we find that there's already a narrative that we have to work against and figure out what happened within a specific space and time around an incident. Observation is something that both the previous speakers mentioned, and it's a very important part of our process as well. And it's I think it's also, Mariana, a deeply political act. And I mentioned that because you said maybe you're not as socially engaged, but observing the world around you is I think is a way of engaging with it and commenting. And architecture, the element that brings all these disparate languages together. Architecture is the glue around which our work is then built. As I mentioned, a lot of us are trained as architects. Many have never worked as architects. I myself have only done a couple of placements at the very beginning of my professional life. but we use the same tools that Mariana and Dimitris would use, which are modeling tools, animation tools, filming tools, to narrate an event.
Thank you, Stefanos. Of course, for your case, it's like the story is before you, already there. After all of these comments, we might say that it's relevant that we all talk in our title. We have the word sustainability, even though this word is more connected to eco-green architecture or to eco products. Here, in that case, is also like how we can create more sustainable lives for our daily social life. And we would like to know from your experience how you believe that technology helped on like talking more about sustainability. Is it something that came on the table because of technology improvements, or is it like something that we would already need to speak about in our lives, even though we would not have all these elements? We can start differently now, so that's okay.
Okay.
Who makes it up?
Can you?
No, I was just saying it's good to mix the order up, okay. like you just did.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, so yeah, I think sustainability is a difficult word to it's heavy and it's so overused that somehow it can mean anything. At the same time, it's important to think in terms of sustainability. Maybe ecology is another word that we can use in a similar context. Sometimes I prefer ecology over sustainability because I think sustainability is closely related to the more technical aspects, while ecology can be related to more political or social aspects that are also important. But I mean, whatever word we choose to use, I think the first thing that we need to understand is that we have to move beyond this idea of green architecture or zero energy and all those things that are important but are not enough, and maybe realize that for something to be ecological or sustainable, it needs to operate in relation to, let's say, three spectra maybe, on the level of the environment, on the level of social forces and society, and on the level of ourselves, of human subjectivity. So I think if we need to really start talking about how things can be sustainable or ecological or whatever we choose to call them, we need to see the assemblage formed by those three things. And if we look at it this way, I think that technology is just a small part of the whole discussion. It helps sometimes, it creates problems other times, but I think it's more about changing our way of looking at things and understanding things than is about keep evolving our technologies in order to become better. Maybe it has to do that if we look at the whole thing as a way to solve a problem, then okay, technology is important. But if we think of the issues that we have as a case where we have to generate possibilities, then I think we need to open up the discussion and see what we can do. And I believe architecture is about creating possibilities, not about solving problems. So, more or less.
Thank you very much. Stefanos, now is your turn, but we are mixing the order.
Okay. You had me reaching for this book from the library. I think it's maybe
Thank you very
a
much.
reference in what you just said. To touch upon Tenia, what you raised about technology, maybe a bit further. Technology obviously plays an important role in what we do. Our work often tries to do two things simultaneously: to use technology to uncover incidents where state or corporate power has been abused, but also to understand the very problems that these technologies bring about. Because there's no condition of dealing with technology that's unproblematic. The history of technology is indeed the history of power and control. So we always try to maintain a critical approach to the technologies we use and to the way we use technology. But each one of the techniques that we use and the technologies we use has an excess and a potential that cannot be easily captured or tamed. And we must find the capacity of technology to be liberated sometimes from its intended use. And I'm talking about surveillance technologies, satellite photography, artificial intelligence. All these are technologies that are traditionally master's tools, and we try to subvert them, so to speak, to bring down the masters. So for us, the real work towards building a sustainable or more ecological approach to life is to figure out how we can unlock the disobedient potential in technology. And this often happens by taking them out of their intended context. So again, we use technologies that the police would use, the army would use, but in reverse. I'm not sure whether it answers your question. Just a few quick thoughts that came to mind.
Thank you very much, Stefanos. It's more or less like a problematic, so it's not like answering the specific question. It's like, I think that we are all in the same level. Let's hear also Mariana.
Just keeping a few notes. Regarding technology, I think it's quite important to talk about, it's something that we've discussed in the past with James Bridle about repurposing technology, because apparently to me, technology is the counter and the foundation of our network world. And it's quite important to start using technology when I first started using a drone, I was thinking that I'm using a machine that was initially designed by the military as a weapon, and then I started using it to observe the world in a different way and from different perspectives. So we just need to decide where we want to stand, and two sides basically when it comes to technology and sustainability as well. To me, there's no such thing as sustainable architecture if there's no sustainability in society in general, sustainability in economy, and socio-political sustainability as well. Just a few thoughts.
Thank you very much. Totally agree, I would say. And is it like sometimes do you feel that all this conversation about being very sustainable on designing a building or designing a project, or is it sometimes this conversation maybe a little bit off the reality? Is it does it have any sense of elitism in terms that we are not already we do not have the solutions for a sustainable society and life, but we are very, very critical if something now is designed, not in terms of designing, but like designing a project, an event, something that is not all around sustainable. Like we let me give an example for fashion. Like, you cannot consume something that is cheap and designed on a boat, no border boat, but you should always buy ethical, organic clothes. But these clothes might cost like many, many times more than something else, and we cannot wait for, like, we cannot expect from all of the people to buy these kind of things and consume them if we do not have all the society boundaries to give them these safe solutions. Like, is it sometimes elitistic to talk nowadays critically about sustainable life in architecture or in new technologies? Is it someone that wants to start the comment, or I don't know? Stefanos?
Yeah, sure. I think, and this is something I've been thinking myself as well. Of course, to demand a radical change from one day to another is, if not elitist, it's you have to take into account the various realities people in the world live in, and the different possibilities each category of the population has. For instance, when I was living in London, I tried to go plastic free, to not buy plastic packaging at all, and I very quickly realized that this is a very expensive hobby. It's not everybody can do it. So of course, to ban certain things or activities, certain types of cars, certain types of packaging, to build in a certain way, also carries its own inequalities and creates its own exclusions along the way. And this is something that we always need to keep in mind. That's not to say, of course, that we should not try this shift, which is incredibly important. So we should always be mindful of that, and we should not let the present model remarket itself through such maneuvers, because we also see a lot of greenwashing happening. Any change, in my opinion, should be collective, since we're talking about our respective architectural praxis. On our end, we try to disseminate our tools and our methodologies to learn from each other, to always operate from multiple perspectives, not simply from a lab in London in front of a set of computers, but also to be on the ground, to have connections with people on the ground. So again, to hear each other, to understand each other, to learn from each other and from other non-human forms of life with whom we share this planet, which is also that I think is important to raise.
Okay, thank you very much, Stefanos. Would you like Mariana to add some comments?
I don't know if I believe that sustainability and green architecture is on every political agenda, but to me, what matters is what happens in reality. So I think it might not be elitist, but I think it's somehow hypocritical, considering that I mean the paradigm of the economy that is driven by increasing global consumption goes against whatever we're discussing now, and this is our economy at the moment. This is how economy works. So I don't know if it's. I don't believe in a sustainable way of living. I'm a natural born pessimist. I think that we're all going to die at some point, and it somehow seems like a happy ending to me, you know. So I don't know if I'm the right person to talk about how we can change things, because I strongly believe that as individuals we can, but I don't think this is enough to make an actual change. And it's definitely not enough to have the word sustainability on a political agenda. When, for example, in Greece, we give way for constructions on beaches and building foundations in the water and selling nature to big businesses and investors.
Yeah, I agree with all the comments because we can say that it is an elitist way of looking at things, and of course each one has a different standpoint to look at things, and that's a good thing and to begin with, because we have different views, different ways to understand things, etc. But then you realize that some people, they don't have access to some of the standpoints, so it becomes a class issue. So I think it's important to, again, to step back and look at the whole picture. For example, you can design a 5-star hotel and have it totally green and zero energy and all this stuff, and then it will still be full of pools inside, and only certain people will have access to it. And I don't know, is that sustainable? Or maybe it is sustainable for the people who use it, but not for the rest. And then you can think of a social housing project, for example. That is not very green, but it creates new living conditions for people that couldn't have access to those conditions. So our public space, that it's not green, but it's beautiful, and people want to go there, and they start to socialize, and they start to form groups, and maybe then act politically, etc. So I think that the book that Stefanos, he was quick to pick that up. It's a very good starting point. It explains how we need to look at those different levels at the same time. It's not, so what I said before is the environment, of course, maybe that's where all the green stuff goes, but also society, and also the human subjectivity, ourselves. And it's not one part of the other. It's not that the environment is the large one, and then inside the environment is society, and then inside is ourselves. I think they are three different things on the same level, equally important, that somehow interconnected. So if we want to judge and say if something is sustainable, I mean, if we want to do that, I don't know if we want to do that, but we need to look at all those three levels and see how it operates in each one of them. And then maybe we can have a safer way to decide what to do.
Green social housing, this is what Mariana asked. And I would say that I agree also with all these comments. It's like maybe more important to have solidarity, which is also a very, very famous word nowadays, as sustainability. Maybe these two words, they could really cooperate, and then we can start of having like the more simple things, as a green social house that is not totally green, okay, but it promotes happy living for people that would not easily have the experience of a totally sustainable hotel in some more luxury beach that was allowed by public to be built there. So maybe you now would like to have your own comments here, and we can have an interaction, or we can keep having our comments. But we only have one microphone, and we cannot get into your comments every time. Vangelis, should we give a microphone to someone, or is it we keep ours here? Are there any comments or questions? Maybe?
Hello, my name is Vangelis. I want to put my thoughts about the green and the sustainability. I believe that as many tries as we do, and we are getting better in this, the main problem is the capitalism. The capitalism is the problem that, in my opinion, that look, let's say that you build a new water with a fantastic plastic packaging. You spend billions on advertising on TV. People buy it. You see the commercial is super attractive. You buy it, and then the media say, "Look, you are consuming too much plastic. Maybe you should change it back to glass." But it's not the consumer's fault. The fault is from the capitalism that they try to sell you something cheap in a thing that they know that's gonna cost to the environment, like plastic or anything. And they try to pull the guilt on you that you are consuming too much meat. Go vegan. You are consuming too much plastic. Do something recycled. But if you see in a neighborhood, there are like 4 butcher shops, and maybe 2 or 1 would be enough. So I believe that the main problem is the capitalism and not so much what we use, but it's the quantity that we use it. In America or in here, if you go to a supermarket, they throw away things that they're not even expired because they made a new deal that they took something in better prices, so they take more products. So instead of paying €1 per product, they pay 80 cents. So I believe this is my opinion. It's the capitalism is not the way that we fix the things, but the quantity that we fix to be competitive to each other. Thank you. What's your opinion about it?
Thank you very much for your comment. Would someone like to comment? Okay, Dimitris.
Well, I think capitalism has something to do with it. I'm not sure that if we get rid of capitalism, I mean, I'm not sure if we can get rid of it. But even if we can, I'm not sure if we are going to solve all those issues and be in a better place. But I'm pretty sure that we can solve a lot of issues. But then, if we try to think in a more, let's say, realistic way, maybe if we try, just by trying to change capitalism or by trying to get rid of it, I think we are going to solve a lot of issues this way too. Even if we don't, we don't manage to create a different system for our society, or I don't know, just realizing that it has to do with how things work is already an important step that changes our perspective.
Yeah. I particularly like Dimitris' comment from earlier that architecture is in a way the discipline, or has to do with creating possibilities, with exploring possibilities. And I think it's well, I agree with what Vangelis said. I think it's up to us through our respective practice to imagine alternatives and to come up with solutions along the way.
Hi, this is Alex from the Sfera project. This Sfera Day and the Sfera project is a project which is even thought about like something targeting younger generations, so Gen Z and millennials. Yeah, the Sfera project is meant even to target younger generations like Gen Z and millennials. I don't know much about architecture, but I was curious in knowing if you have experience, is there anything new generations are bringing to your profession? Do you have something to say about that. That would be interesting to me. It can be anything, but.
You are in academics also, maybe? You are with the young generation a lot?
I can very quickly, very quickly, I would say that they bring ferocity and a sense of urgency that was missing. They understand that we don't have a lot of time and that we need to be very careful with how we inhabit this world. They're very technologically skilled, which is quite technical on the technical side, and we cherish working with younger people, even younger than myself. These generations that are coming up now, they have seen enough and they want to do it differently.
Very interesting, Stefanos. Dimitris?
Yeah, there are always new things that come on the table when younger people deal with whatever you are dealing, architecture, for example. I don't know, from my experience at the university, where you think it's of course this sense of urgency. It's something that you can almost touch it. Especially after the whole economical crisis and the conditions that we are facing, you understand that the students, they want to finish with their studies, and they want to understand what they can do with what they learn. Maybe when we were students, somehow I think we didn't care that much about that part of our studies, what we are going to do with what we learn afterwards. So that's something that now is definitely more urgent. I'm not sure how it changes things in relation to architecture, because from what I see around me, architecture more or less remains the same. Even after 10 years of economical crisis, nothing really changed. And most architectural production in Greece is hotels and really expensive houses on the islands. That was before the crisis. That's also now. So it looks like architecture is not listening to the younger generation. Maybe we should stop listening to architecture. I don't know.
Without ways to express their anger and change things. I believe younger generations are. I get the sense of impatience, and this might have to do with the idea that they feel doomed somehow. At least in my circle, younger people feel that have no future, and that might be a reason for them to take action. And I don't know if anyone can actually change things just by themselves, just a young generation, but they might start adding some pressure.
Great, thank you very much. Well, it's been an hour here, so we have to close and say goodbye. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Stefanos, for connecting. Thank you, Dimitris.
Thank you.
Mariana. Thank you all. And hope to see you and discuss out of the panel.
Thank you so much.